daily words of God. God, being the greatest throughout the universe and in the realm above, could he fully explain himself using the image of a flesh? God clothes himself in this flesh in order to do one stage of his work. There is no particular significance to this image of the flesh. It bears no relation to the passing of ages, nor does it have anything to do with God's disposition. Why did Jesus not allow the image of him to remain? Why did he not let man paint his image so that it could be passed on to later generations? Why did he not allow people to acknowledge that his image was the image of God? Although the image of man was created in the image of God, would it have been possible for the appearance of man to represent the exalted image of God? When God becomes flesh, he merely descends from heaven into a particular flesh. It is his spirit that descends into a flesh, through which he does the work of the Spirit. It is the Spirit that is expressed in the flesh, and it is the Spirit who does his work in the flesh. The work done in the flesh fully represents the Spirit, and the flesh is for the sake of the work, but that does not mean that the image of the flesh is a substitute for the true image of God himself. This is not the purpose or the significance of God become flesh. He becomes flesh only so that the Spirit may find a place to reside that suits his working, the better to achieve his work in the flesh, so that people can see his deeds, understand his disposition, hear his words, and know the wonder of his work. His name represents his disposition. His work represents his identity, but he has never said that his appearance in the flesh represents his image. That is merely a notion of man. And so, the crucial aspects of the incarnation of God are his name, his work, his disposition, and his gender. These are used to represent his management in this age. His appearance in the flesh bears no relation to his management, being merely for the sake of his work at the time. Yet it is impossible for God incarnate to have no particular appearance, and so he chooses the appropriate family to determine his appearance. If the appearance of God were to have representative significance, then all those who possess facial features similar to his would also represent God. Would that not be an egregious mistake? The portrait of Jesus was painted by man in order that man might worship him. At the time, the Holy Spirit gave no special instructions, and so man passed that imagined portrait on until today. In truth, according to God's original intention, man should not have done this. It is only the zeal of man that has caused the portrait of Jesus to remain until this day. God is spirit, and man will never be capable of encompassing what his image is in the final analysis. His image can only be represented by his disposition. As for the appearance of his nose, of his mouth, of his eyes, and of his hair, these are beyond your capacity to encompass. When revelation came to John, he beheld the image of the Son of Man. Out of his mouth was a sharp, double-edged sword. His eyes were like flames of fire. His head and hair were white like wool. His feet were like polished bronze, and there was a golden sash around his chest. Although his words were extremely vivid, the image of God he described was not the image of a created being. What he saw was only a vision, and not the image of a person from the material world. John had seen a vision, but he had not witnessed the true appearance of God. The image of God's incarnate flesh, being the image of a created being, is incapable of representing God's disposition in its entirety. When Jehovah created mankind, he said he did so in his own image and created male and female. At that time, he said he made male and female in the image of God. Although the image of man resembles the image of God, this cannot be construed as meaning that the appearance of man is the image of God. Nor can you use the language of mankind to fully epitomize the image of God, for God is so exalted, so great, so wondrous and unfathomable.